Hello everyone, this is Mujin speaking. Today I'll be talking about composition studies. I hope the things that I talk about will give you some knowledge or guidelines on how you can do your composition studies, have better impression of compositions and apply them to your own work. Before that, I would actually like to thank a certain artist. I would like to thank Kuya for teaching me certain things about composition studies, which I will share along the way. I asked if I could share with you guys what he shared with me, and he's okay with it. So thank you so much, Kuya. Do check out his socials. Kuya usually helps people when he has free time. He's really busy, but I really appreciate him usually helping out the community or helping me out whenever he has free time. So let me do my part and give back to the community as well. So I'll be talking about the composition studies that I did. But first, let's get down to theory. So usually we will talk about the elements in the composition. And when we talk about elements, we will talk about the big, medium, small, which is the size. And we'll talk about shapes, like the triangular shape, the quad shape. And what makes shapes? We have angles. And then we usually have space, which is like the positive space, the negative space, the dark versus the lights. And then obviously we have the focal point and non-focal points. Focal point being the more interesting area, the boring area being the non-focal point. And certain things are more detailed, and certain areas that are not so detailed, and things that are like more graphically clear versus graphically loose. And obviously in the composition we have the rhythm, which leads the line. And not to forget, we have lighting, which can be separated into mid key, low key, high key, and in perspective. I created this as a checklist to cover the things that you can do or follow up in your composition studies. You don't have to follow the exact sequence, but do take notes that these are the areas or parts that you could check. So let me get down this. So these are some images that we have for studies purposes. So if I were to cut this out, so how do I achieve the black and white effect? Let me recap. Threshold should be threshold. Oh, posterize. Nope. Sorry. My apologies, I don't really have much time to do all these tutorials, but I think I should really give back to the community in any way I could. So all these are recorded in classroom format in real time. This should be threshold, yep. Okay. Clipping, threshold, clipping. Oops, sorry, wrong slide. Threshold, clipping. Right, so the default number is 128, and as you can see, this is too dark, so let me push out the light. So if we push towards the right, it's too dark, which is not what you see in the image. So but if we push too much to the left, it's overexposed, which does not reflect the light and dark family in the composition. So let me see how far I can push. Right, Control Y, grayscale to check. So you can see these are the more exposed areas. Exposed, brighter areas. And then when we check, it fits what we talk about, the exposed areas, the bright areas, the bright areas, bright areas. So you know that you're on the right track. Okay, so this is how you do it. Right. Okay, so composition study 1, we have the flash. So based on our evaluation, when we check in grayscale, this is a mid-key lighting. Why is it a good composition? Because flash is separate from the background, the character silhouette is clear, and in my opinion, this contrast area push out flash, making him look like he stands out to us. And when we zoom in, we can see the main contrasting point, which is the face and his symbol, making him look like he's the focal point. And I also try to mark out the shapes. You can see triangles, quads, and I can see the big shapes, which is centered around his cheek, the middle shape at his ear, the smaller shape at his eyes and his nose. So composition study number 2, where we have the character standing here. It's a mid-key lighting. Why is it a bad composition? Because when we set the image to threshold and when we set the image to grayscale, it looks like the 3 characters are merging with the background, as you can see with the dark areas around here. And when we check the grayscale, the darks are equally dark as the background. So it's hard to separate them. What would I do to make it better? I'll probably add the mist around. I'll add the mist around certain areas to make the characters pop out even more. So moving on to Spider-Man. This is a relative high key lighting. The composition is good because the character is in center, has the main focal point. And the silhouette is dark compared to the brighter background. And for the rhythm, we can see that it's going towards left to right, leading the eye. And when we read, we usually go from left to right. And based on my studies, the bridge that he's jumping off from here, it leads us to look from left to right, and we can see like it's going from bright to dark. So there's a rhythm that really pushes us comfortably from the left to the right area. This is where he leaps off. We can see the iconic triangular composition, and when we do another composition marking of the shapes of the background, we can see that there's a triangle area here, there's a triangle silhouette, there's a triangle shape covering his silhouette, there's another triangular area covering the whole building. So, and we're reading from left to right, and these 3 triangles creates a very dynamic composition, and he's doing a dynamic action of jumping off. And this is good because we can see that he clearly stands out from the background. And when we check in grayscale, you can see the dark clouds lead our eye from the left to right. So more Spider-Man composition. So this is a relatively high key shot. So, and when we check in threshold and grayscale, we can see that the both characters are separate from the background. Especially so in threshold. So the bridge here, this part of the bridge here is dark, this part of the bridge here is bright, and leads us from this area to this area where we are looking at Spider-Man, and the background is bright, so making this character pop out even more. And then the bright background here makes the main character pop out more. So, and we know Spider-Man is definitely the main character because it's bigger in size. and the strongest contrast is still him. And this is where I do so the building here is dark. His silhouette is dark. There are lots of bright areas here, so making him the strongest contrast, making him stand out. And then we look at the next composition, right? Batman v Superman. This is a low-key lighting. As we can see in threshold and in background, in grayscale, the subject elements are separate from the background and the character silhouette is clear. And usually it helps if you identify the light source. And when we look at Wonder Woman, the strongest contrast is at the face, which stands out the strongest contrast is at the shield, and it moves towards the face. As you can see, the darks, the brights, the darks and the brights here. Second set of studies. As we can see from this example, this is a high key lighting. The composition is good because the character stands out from the background. As you can see, brights, darks, brights, darks, brights. The strongest contrast being in the face, and look at these perspective lines leading to the character, making the character stand out. Next we have another Spider-Man shot. This is a mid-key lighting. So as we can see on the left where it's bright, and on the right where it's relatively bright, in the center it's dark, creating a strong focal contrasting point. And when we look closer, Spider-Man has visible contrast, or rather strong contrast, with the light family being here and the dark family being here. And and this is a one-point perspective where it all leads towards the character, so making him the focal point of this composition. And another Spider-Man shot. So this is based on grayscale. This is a mid-key lighting. The building on the left is bright. The helicopter on the right is bright. But relatively, on the left is brighter, so it leads our eye from left to right. With the helicopter providing another bright element here, it will naturally lead our eye from left to right. And the strongest contrast, despite the strongest contrast being on the helicopter, there is still relatively strong contrast on both characters, as we can see between the light and shadow family here. And we know that the light source comes from the top left. So despite the strongest contrast being here in this threshold display, when we look at the display here, the strongest contrast based on grayscale is still the focal point here, compared to the helicopter where the whites are actually gray. The next shot of Spider-Man. So this is a relatively high key lighting. The character is in the center, where everything else is pretty much bright except the center, with the subject elements leading us from left to right again, and with the perspective lines leading us to look at the center, with the subject elements in the background leading our eyes from left to right. So in my opinion, this is not a very good composition, and for starters, this is a low-key lighting composition. The darks of the character versus the darks on the background is about the same, making this character blend in with the background, except the contrast here, the bright contrast here makes the flesh stands out. So this is not really a good composition. Perhaps they could add some mist here to better separate the character from the background. So the last example, this is a low-key lighting. This is a good composition because the character is clearly separated from the background and the character silhouette is clear. The lights and shadows family from the background in the background is clear. Like for example, this part here is dark, this part here is bright, and there's a clear triangular shapes that leads our eye going from left to right. It forms a strong dynamic triangular shape with the sharpest pointy part towards the right. So it forces our eye to read from left to right. And not to mention, since the light source is from the left, there's a clear light and shadow family in the character, creating good contrast, making the character pop out. So in general, I usually find out whether it's a low key, mid key, or high key lighting, find out where the light source is, identify whether the characters stand out from the composition. Usually the strongest contrast is at the character. We identify leading lines, usually leading lines flow from left to right. Shapes, the silhouettes of shapes, like for example the triangle here, helps make our character look more dynamic. The triangle here and the quad shape here makes him wrapping around his silhouette, makes him seems more dynamic. And usually in splash art, the big, medium, small relationships are more obvious. And always remember the characters being the focal point, and they're usually more detailed there. And that's about it I want to cover. Thank you so much.